Okay, so here we are. Let me try again to share. There we go. Okay, so can you all see the document?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So you have a full month. I'm kind of concerned when I say that because I know that sounds like it's super far away to complete this, but it's going to come sooner than what you think. So before I get started, just a quick reminder, I am going to require a check-in, as I wrote in the email, on the 24th. And that's really, and again, I'm not going to dictate, well, you have to have 5 slides done. It's not going to be like that. But really, it's just to kind of force you all to get started in the next 2 weeks on this. It's 2 weeks from today on the 24th. So my advice to you is this week, your group needs to sit down, allocate responsibilities, and really create a timeline. You cannot wait until the last week of class to pull this together. This is 20% of your grade. But perhaps more importantly, this is really something that you can put on your LinkedIn profile. This is something that really can have a lot of traction, hopefully to help you with interviews and so forth. So my hope is that this gives you a little extra push to put a little bit more love and time and attention. Not that you wouldn't already, but again, I really think the outcomes and implications of this assignment are bigger than just this assignment. So to that end, you are charged with doing, it's a presentation deck, there's no written paper, for a social media plan for your client. So the first part summarizes, kind of takes some of your learning from the previous projects, but there are some new pieces and things that you need to do. So this is both instructions and rubrics. So it is 200 points. So it is considerable. I'm here to help you guys. I really want you to do well. Again, if something comes up, let me know. This is the semester of flexibility as we're all kind of getting into our new normal. But you can see right here what everything is worth. So to start off, you obviously need your typical title page, you need, names, and I'm not going to dictate, guys, like how many slides per section. Really, it's going to depend, and I think each of you has your own style. However, what I am still noticing with your presentations is a lot of you need to be putting a little bit more thought into the aesthetic with them. Again, you can't just last minute, pull in your slides. All the slides need to be cohesive, they need to match. There needs to be, readability. While these slides are going to be more descriptive than a normal presentation, again, you guys are not, unfortunately, going to be able to present it given the situation with COVID, but there does need to be enough text to help your client when you give this to them. They can kind of look at it, and it really is kind of a clear indication and a path forward for them. Anyway, okay. So again, stop me if you have any questions, but the first section here is really an overview, primarily drawing from your social media audit. You are not going to recap all of your social media audit, okay? But the first part is just a quick overview, things you've answered, frankly, in at least 2 other projects, a slide. What is kind of the business situation for your client? And that, to a certain extent, has changed somewhat with COVID, some additional challenges, which might make social media even more important, but what value are they offering, what's unique, et cetera. So for the most part, you've already answered this. And you've really also answered 2, although I think it would be helpful to go back and revisit some of your competitors as well, and kind of at least not update in terms of going back to the Excel spreadsheet and changing it, but at least having an updated version in terms of what competitors are doing, et cetera, especially in light of COVID. But for here, I simply want you to give me an overview of, again, focusing on your client, what online platform are they using, audience size, how are they doing? So average kind of in terms of engagement, just some overall metrics. Also tell me, in general, what are the messages doing? Again, this is going to be prior to you doing work on your client's account. Who are they being communicated, et cetera. And then I do want you to talk briefly about competitors. Do not give me a long overview of your competitors, but more briefly discuss what they're doing, their communication messages, but really highlighting opportunities for your client. So what were the takeaways after looking at the competitors? What are they doing well that maybe your client can incorporate, okay? The next section is, again, it's worth 15 points. And most of this, again, is just a summary of what you've done. So I want to see the buyer, a readable buyer persona. That was an issue with some of the projects. I couldn't exactly read it. So give me the image, but also answer these questions. Make sure you highlight them. Why are they purchasing it? Why are they drawn to it? And I really want you to go back to the buyers during the decision making. What are the steps? What are they thinking about during that? And for this section, I know you guys had research for the buyer persona. I would like you to reference, just put a citation, for the stuff, or anything that you're bringing into the report that you, again, this is also drawing upon the buyer persona project that you did a while ago, and put your references in the back of a presentation. So in that respect, kind of treat it like a paper. That makes sense. Again, stop me if you have any questions. The next section is really recapping the organic posts that you did. So here, I really want you to give me a good summary of what is happening, and really what's happening, essentially what you guys are doing right now. So you're posting, and hopefully, as we've talked about, everyone is monitoring their client, responding, seeing, and hopefully you're getting good engagement. So after you're done, and you all should be done in about 10 days or so with your posts, ideally, you need to step back and look at, okay, well, what posts worked? What didn't? Were there some themes that worked? But don't just tell me, show me. So make sure you do a really good job, again, on the presentation slides, putting the posts that work so we can see them, which is a lot easier, and make sure that you include the engagement numbers. So we're going to talk a little bit later in class about analytics. We'll talk about presenting those numbers, but I need to see them. You also need to talk about what didn't work. There's going to be some things that are going to fall short, which is fine. It happens. But the idea is we learn from that. So put those up. Why didn't it work? And also I want a discussion on, what content worked for different buyer personas, if you can do it. Not if, but there needs to be something in the presentation about it. Again, when you create a content, you were supposed to identify a buyer persona it was targeted. So kind of recap that. What worked? Do you have content, or did you have content for the various stages of the buyer persona? Okay. So up to this point in kind of me talking about this is really a recap, more or less, of what you've done with some updating. Okay. However, the rest of the report is relatively new. Okay. So this is new terrain, is about 2/3 of the report, a little bit less. So again, you're doing a social media marketing plan. So every plan has, of course, objectives. So you need to write at least 3 different objectives and put them on a slide. And it should be drawn, obviously, from your client conversations that you've had. We've already spent time talking about this, but also, again, your experience with posting what you've seen. So again, are they goals related to, or objectives related to awareness, engagement, new followers? What do you want? But when you write it, and again, it needs to be realistic, and you're going to decide that based on your experiences. Make sure that they're smart objectives. And again, what we mean by that, just a second, Mike is joining us. What we mean by that is, for this section, is, of course, if you're talking about getting new followers, how many new followers? Okay. So increase new followers by, a specific number, a percentage, and give a date. Okay. Again, we can set our end date for this perhaps in, let's say, 6 months from when you give the report. You're not going to be actually doing this. You're just giving them a plan to follow. So you can set it for 6 months out. Does that make sense to everybody? So everything makes sense so far? Okay. If not, stop me. The next portion of this is looking at, let me scroll down here, coming up with platform strategy, hey Mike, and content. So again, this is still the new stuff, and this is actually worth a lot. This is 70 points. So make sure that you spend a fair bit of time on this. This, when you're doing the report, this is going to take you a bit to do. So what you're doing is really, where should they go from here? So for example, should they just stick with Facebook or Instagram? You're giving them advice. Or should they go to another platform? If so, why? So you need to justify kind of your suggestions here. Also, for platform strategy, I would encourage you to perhaps make any recommendations on changing or improving the platform. We've spent time talking about that, whether that's consistency with the cover photo, images, and so forth. So include that. For the content, again, this is the portion you're giving them advice going forward. So yeah, do you have a question? No? Okay. So you've already, hopefully, and right now you're in the process of learning what's working on your client accounts, what's not. So again, based on your learnings that are going to continue towards the end of the month, what content should they go forward with? So again, based on what you're learning, what should they do? And so for this section, I want you maybe to expand on some of the content ideas that you've done that have worked, but this is where you're giving them a roadmap for, okay, this is what we've done, this is what worked, this is what you need to be doing. So make sure that I want you to develop, emphasize themes and ideas, what worked for them to use. And I also want you to come up with new mock-ups of some, that reflect that discussion. So come up with mock-ups that relate to the buyer's journey. Again, it needs to be new stuff that works. And again, you can draw upon, or just play with a little bit some of the previous stuff you've done, so you're not starting from scratch. But again, you're giving them this roadmap that hopefully they can take and do something with. But make sure that, you're talking about what's appropriate for the buyer persona, what's appropriate for the journey. And I also, even though you didn't do ads because of the situation, I also, in content strategy, want you thinking about and talking about ads. So should they run ads? The answer probably is yes, right? But what should they focus on, and give them some ideas with that. So explain, what ads they should use, how they should target, etc. Okay. Now the other piece to this, guys, is influencers. And again, influencers don't, we're talking about micro, small influencers, and I really want even organizations for a lot of you. So I want you thinking about, you need to identify specifically groups and people that might, and I'm not saying you're not going to approach them, that might be good for your client to partner with. So you need to tell me who and why. And also, how do you know if this is potentially a successful relationship if you're working with them? What do you hope to achieve out of that relationship? Okay. Last two sections is metrics and budget. So again, we're going to talk about this shortly in terms of metrics, but you obviously have, you have to have a plan forward in terms of measuring. So what should your client look at? What are the KPIs? How should they measure? And so thinking about that. And again, we're going to talk, this is going to make more sense. You're going to get a better idea of what I expect when we talk about that in the lecture. The last thing I want you to do is a budget. But in writing the budget, I want you to realize that most of your clients have little to no money to devote to this. And so keep that in mind and keep it as realistic. But I want you to think about really, and I want you to plan for 6 months, okay? What are the costs involved with social media? So that involves software, it involves getting images, sources, and so forth. Last but not least, obviously, and this is typical for any paper, the professionalism, the images, the pictures, and so forth, strong writing, grammar, spacing, all of that falls in the last bucket. So that's it. It is a lot, but again, you do have a lot of time, but you do need to start working on it. As I mentioned, I think the path forward right now is for you all to touch base with your group, kind of come up with a plan of action, who's going to do what, and also recognize that there's going to be a check-in on the 24th. And I'll probably send at individual times with groups. I don't necessarily need all of you there, just, ideally 2 people, but I just want to talk about your progress and issues and just check in. And I kind of want to see what you've been up to. Again, I'm not going to crack down if not much has been done. I'm not really expecting, but I just want to kind of force you guys to work on this a little bit. So what questions can I help you guys with on this?